Good morning, everybody. My name is Julia Payton-Jones. Welcome to Tea Today with Hannah Rothschild. Hannah is a CBE, a British writer, documentary filmmaker, businesswoman and philanthropist. Her biography, The Baroness, was published in 2012 in the UK, US and 12 other territories. Her first novel, The Improbability of Love, published in 2015, won the Bollinger Woodhouse Prize for the Best Comic Novel and was runner-up for the Bailey Women's Prize for Fiction in 2015. Her much-anticipated latest novel, House of Trelawney, was published in February 2020. Hannah's features and interviews appear in The Telegraph, The Times London, The New York Times and Vogue. Her documentaries have been shown at the BBC, HBO and are at international film festivals. She's lectured on art, film and philanthropy at the Getty, the Royal Academy of Arts and at the Hay Festival. From August 2015 to October 2019, she was the first female.
Oops.
Services to literature and philanthropy. Now, I just want to check that I'm plugged in, and I think I am. Welcome. How lovely. No sound. Here we go. Hold on a second. Let me try again. Okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you not hear me?
Yes, I think we're okay now. I can hear you.
Good.
So congratulations. What an incredible career. It's absolutely extraordinary. So tell me, what is it like belonging to a dynasty whose name is known all over the world? Do you feel a weight of responsibility? And what was it like growing up with the Rothschild name?
Well, let's start with a punchy question. Good. I like punchy questions to get us going on a Saturday morning. Right. I think when I was young, I felt very overwhelmed by it. I'd walk into a room, people had preconceptions about the name, and quite often I didn't, because if you're born into a family and you grew up with that name, you don't know any different. So
Of course.
people made a big deal about something which to me was, you know, same as being called Peyton Jones or. And then I started to understand a little bit more about it, and the tag of being Jewish, of being bankers, of being, you know, from Frankfurt, were all tags that felt rather foreign to me, because, you know, I hadn't been brought up in a particularly religious household. I certainly wasn't a banker. I'd never been to Frankfurt. So again, and then it got even more alarming when I started to hear about the incredible successes of some of my relations. So whether it was my aunt Emma, who was the youngest ever woman at Oxford, or my great aunt Miriam, who was the Queen of the Fleas, or another great aunt who was the Jazz Baroness. So, you know, those were just the women, let alone the men. So I think I struggled for a really long time to try and live up to it and to understand it. And when I felt more confident in my own right, and I worked at the BBC, and partly I worked at the BBC because no Rothschild had worked there, and there was, you know, I had to get it on my own merit. So I began to build confidence, I think, through doing rather than being, if you know what I mean. So I was part of it, but I had to do in order to be public. And then I started to feel quite proud. And I think as I got older, to be honest with you, I started to see its advantages. And there are many advantages, and I'm not saying there aren't. You know, I have incredible advantages of opportunity through education or access. I have advantages of having fantastic role models in my family, which I think a lot of people haven't had. And yes, you know, it opens doors. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't. It does.
I know, and I mean, having done my research, I mean, I am completely and utterly in love with Pannonica, your great aunt, who you wrote about, you made a film about. Will you, because I'm deviating slightly from my questions, but I'm so keen to get in for everybody to understand this story, because she was a phenomenon, and you met her, of course. You went to New York and you met her with her 306 cats.
Yeah.
I can't imagine, but still, tell them.
You imagine only, don't try and live it. So again, when I was part of my struggle to try and find a place in this illustrious family was to read about, previous Rothschilds. And I got hold of our family tree, which goes back quite a long way. Probably not very deservedly, but my grandfather was almost determined to take us to Moses, frankly. But it's a long family tree, and there was a great aunt called Pannonica, which is a great name anyway.
Yes,
so
fabulous.
And so I said to my father, well, "Who's Pannonica?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm not entirely sure, And I thought, "It's your aunt, Dad." Anyway, it turned out, I then found out a little about her. She had flown Lancaster bombers in the war. She'd been born in 1911. She'd had 5 children, and the most extraordinary story I heard about her was that she had been in New York. Her husband at that point had been posted to South America as ambassador. And she'd gone to see a friend of hers, and the friend had said, and the children and the husband were in South America with on this posting. And the friend said, "Have you ever heard of Thelonious Monk?" "No, Thelonious what?" So he said, "You must listen to this record." She said, "Do it, forget it." And he goes, "Just listen to the first few bars." And he puts the stylus, as they had in the
of course.
And it was like the vinyl version of a spell being cast.
Yeah.
And she left her husband and she left her 5 children and she went in search of Thelonious Monk. So cut to, I'm 25, I'm sent by the BBC to New York to make a film about artists and collectors. And I pitch up, very different city to now. And I look in the phone book and I find her name in the phone book. And I call her, very full of trepidation. "Excuse me, I'm your great niece, Hannah." And there's this unbearably long silence. And then she goes, "Wild."
Fantastic. It's such a great story. And I can only imagine what it must have been like. She wasn't allowed to run around the house because she might, or hide, because she might dirty her clothes. She could do sewing. She really had no education. And she went from that to living consistently with black musicians, but the geniuses of all time, and being at the epicenter of that community and enabling them to make great, great music.
So she used her Rothschild inheritance. The Rothschilds, they were, I think, to be honest, they were confused by her life choices.
I can imagine.
They never cut her off. They didn't cut her off. And they were, for all my family's foibles and whatever else, they're very forgiving and encompassing. So they didn't cut her off. So she used what money she had, which wasn't an enormous amount, to, as you say, support an entire generation of jazz.
Fantastic.
She's slightly Miss Havisham-like because she kind of got into bebop and didn't really move. Bebop, that was her thing. So, and famously, Charlie Parker died in her apartment. Yeah. She had nowhere else to go. And she lived with Thelonious for the last 10 years of his life in this house, as you say, with 305 cats.
It just doesn't bear thinking about. But still, greatness, one of the things that really fascinates me is this idea of greatness, because people kind of assume that greatness in any discipline, it doesn't matter what it is, outside the arts, business, it doesn't matter, is something that is kind of normal, maybe not every day, but kind of around and about. And actually it isn't. It's a rare, rare thing. And to live with that generation of musicians, when I say live with, I mean to be really in the heart of their world. What a privilege, even though it came at a very high price.
Well, the price she paid, as you rightly say, it was a high price. She lost her children. They stayed with her father. She was ostracized pretty much from society. Not that I think she particularly cared about that, but nevertheless, she was a white woman living amongst black men, which at the time was not de rigueur, let's put it that way.
No, absolutely not.
She then, there was a famous incident where she was driving Thelonious to a gig in Baltimore in Maryland. So you're going really across the state line from the north to the south. And the policeman saw a white woman in a Rolls Royce, naturally, black man. He pulled them over and he searched the trunk, and in it he found a little bit of marijuana, which in those days was classified as a narcotic. Monk, meanwhile, and he wanted to arrest Monk. Monk was terrified of being arrested because he'd spent time in prison already on Rilke's, for drug issues, and also, frankly, just for having the wrong cabaret car. Any, they locked them up. And he was desperate not to go to prison, particularly not to go to prison in Baltimore, which was notorious. So he hung onto the steering wheel for dear life. And the policeman got his truncheon, or whatever they call it in America, and beat his hand. And of course, Nika could see this famous pianist might never play again.
Oh, my God.
It's mine. Absolutely, it's mine. The dope is mine. Leave him alone. So Monk was released and she went to prison. And what that meant for her was obviously being in prison, which, no fun for anybody, but more importantly, in some respects, would be deported back to England, away from her friends, away from her, which, was the end of her life as she saw it.
Yes. I mean, I could spend a full half hour talking about her, but I've got other questions, so I need to press on as a timekeeper.
Sure.
So your father, I think I'm right in saying, has nominated you as his heir apparent to his widely diverse range of interests, which of course is business, philanthropy, incredible collecting, and the very active role that your family has in supporting the Jewish community, including Yad Hanadiv. So how did you prepare for this? Was this something that you always expected, or is it something that you come to in a less sort of gradual way?
Well, I think I am nominated in many areas. I think my father's never going to nominate everyone absolutely. But no, it wasn't. I have a brother, and our family tradition was absolutely that the men were expected to take it, but incidentally, that held true since the end of the 18th century, and as a result, nearly did for the family. By the way, because at the time,
my lovely, can I interrupt you for a second? We can't hear you so well. Do you have any ear thingy-bobbies, which is what I wear?
Of course.
Thank you very much.
I'm so sorry.
No, don't worry. No, don't worry. I hope you don't mind me interrupting you.
Now, can you hear me now?
Yes. If you want to put up the volume a little, that would be good too.
Let me just make sure that it's we've got the right. Could you hang
there
on
we go.
When I make sure I've got.
No, that's great. I think that's a big improvement. Lovely.
Any better?
Thank you. Yes, much better. Thanks
Good.
so much.
I'm so sorry. Okay.
No worries.
So as I was saying, it's a family of primogeniture, and that continued very strongly. But in fact, at the beginning of the 20th century, there weren't really suitable males. So actually, the family got into quite a lot of trouble. There were but nevertheless, that's gone on. And my brother took a decision to go and live in America and to pursue his own goals. And my father has 3 daughters, so he really had to kind of have a look around what was available. So, here I am,
But and so now you have to balance all these sort of, I wouldn't say competing priorities, but certainly priorities. You have such an impressive career as a writer, as a filmmaker, as a businesswoman, a philanthropist. And so how do you make them all sit well together?
Listen, this is going to sound like a pat answer, but it's not. I mean, I have incredible colleagues. As you know, you look, if you've got really good colleagues, it makes you look quite good. And actually, I still work very closely with Jacob. So we see each other every day, even during lockdown. He lives next door. And so we work closely. There's lots of, as I say, excellent people around us. I'm organized. I do try and fit in as much to my day as I possibly can. And the great thing, where I'm very lucky, is I'm really genuinely interested in absolutely everything I do. So therefore, it never feels like work. It just feels like, oh, great, now what's going to happen? You know what I mean? And what do I? So it really feels like an adventure, and I try and keep that.
I mean, that is, of course, a wonderful attitude to have. And you talk about being in love with writing and treating it as a sort of wonderful love affair. Can you talk a little more about that? Because
Sure.
It's a great description.
So I came to writing quite late, partly because it took me a bit of time to find my voice, my tone, if you like. Partly I needed a bit more confidence. And then by the time I started properly writing, I was already, in my late 40s. So, and I had a full-time job. So I thought, well, how the hell am I going to do this? How are you supposed to fit writing in and everything else? So then I thought, well, the only thing to do is to treat it like a love affair. So, which incidentally I wasn't having at the time. So I thought, right, fine. So I had a notebook, and I used to take the notebook, to coffee shops on secret assignations or away on holiday, just the two of us. Sounds a bit sad, but it worked. Or occasionally we go to a hotel together. And so I really did treat it as if it were my secret lover. And that kind of process, if you like, has served me quite well. Unfortunately now, there's a real lover, so it's getting in the way a bit of the secret lover writing. But, I'm still managing, just a bit more slowly.
No, but it's very exciting. And of course, your latest book was published in February this year to great acclaim. And I think you're thinking about it as a trilogy. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes. So The House of Trelawney is part one, and it follows the fortunes of a Cornish family through the 2008 crash. And the subtitle is New Money, Old Money, No Money. So that follows what happens in the crash. And then the story which I'm writing at the moment picks up on the same family through the rise of nationalism, Brexit, those two elections. So the next one's political. But of course, as we all know, what's going on at the moment has ridden a kind of coach and horses through all best intentions and plans.
Absolutely. And we're living through a time. I mean, I'm wondering, was the period, I think it was 8 months, when you were filming Peter Mandelson for your documentary about him, which is a great film. Has that informed at all your research for the book?
Absolutely, yeah. No. So I followed. It was really kind of Peter, actually. He let me follow him, through the 2010 election, and he was. I mean, I learned so much from him. I mean, he is,
I can imagine,
so clever. And he's so, people say he's Machiavellian, and I'd say he would be proud of that. So I don't think he'd mind me saying that. But he has a very careful and clever way of following stories and of never giving too much away and never letting his side down and always keeping someone else guessing. And I'm trying in the book to find a character who does justice to him. And actually, one of the problems, I haven't quite found a character who really does justice to Peter Mandelson, because he's a great character.
Yes, a great character and wonderful wit. Very
funny, very naughty. And it was no surprise really, the Labour Party couldn't live with him ultimately, but certainly couldn't live without him either. I mean, you feel the lack of Peter Mandelson in politics, I think. Whenever you look around, you think that's what we need.
Yes. But one of the other things that happened, of course, since maybe he was very much more in charge, is the whole rise of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. And of course, the concerns that are widely expressed about this. Yeah. Do you share these concerns? And to what do you attribute this rise of anti-Semitism, which personally I find not only unbearably offensive, but during the celebrations of VE Day, it seems, almost inconceivable that I would even be asking this question.
Yeah, I don't know. I genuinely don't know whether it's got anything to do with Peter. I would hope not.
No, I'm not suggesting it does, by the way,
good.
For the avoidance of doubt. Absolutely not.
I think that what happened is it's very, very lazy people, and I mean this in the most pejorative way. Very lazy people can confuse anti-Israel and what's happening in Israel with the Palestinian issue, etc., with with feelings against Jews. And I feel that's what happened to a lot of people in the Labour Party. They've kind of thought, well, we don't really like what's happening in Palestine. We don't really like what's happening, with the war. We don't really like what's happening there. And that means that all Jews all over the world are like that. Now, I think if you ask most Israelis about Palestine, they would say they don't like it either. And certainly the large amount of Israelis and Jews that I know favour a proper two-state solution. But it's so, as I say, if you're it's lazy thinking just to try and lump all evils on one people. And we've seen that throughout history. I was reading history, for example, of the Black Death in the 14th century. I mean, not so random, obviously, given what we're living through. And there again, guess what happened? You know, they put everything on the Jews too. So the Jews have been through history a very, very convenient backstop for the ills of society. And I'm afraid, I think that's just what some lazy people in the Labour Party and elsewhere did. And like you, I find it very upsetting.
Yeah, it's deeply upsetting. And can the foundation, are there any plans at the foundation to either through education or maybe other means to create a counterbalance to this?
So we have three foundations. We have Yad Hanadiv, as you mentioned, in Israel. We have the Rothschild Foundation, which is much more concerned with the arts in this country. And we have the Rothschild Foundation Europe, which looks at European Jewry and those issues. And what we've done traditionally is to do attraction rather than promotions and to try and stay away from politics. So I think on the whole, what we try and do is support the very, very best in elements of society rather than get too involved in specifics about what might be happening against communities. And sometimes the very best can be supporting a community or making sure that a graveyard isn't desecrated, you know, or making sure that Holocaust survivors can live out their old age with dignity, or, you know, supporting the Weizmann Institute in its attempts to find a vaccine for COVID. I mean, it's very, very broad, but on the whole, it's not political. And my feeling is that we should stay above that fray.
Yes, I mean, I can understand why that position would be taken by the foundation and, of course, your family. So moving now on to the very important role you had in the arts, amongst many, which was being the first female chair of the National Gallery Board of Trustees. You succeeded from your father. Did you encounter resistance when you took over?
No, I didn't. And it was actually 25 years between when my father resigned and when I took over. So I succeeded from Mark Getty. It was quite a long break.
It's a very long break. For me, obviously, the Rothschild being your father, I remember so well as being chair of the National Gallery. And so my apologies for making that error. But did you, whether or not it was clearly not taking over from your father, did you have any resistance when you were appointed chair? And do you think that women now have broken the glass ceiling?
Well, I applied for the trusteeship of the National Gallery originally through the Guardian newspaper. So I went in not as a kind of nepotistic thing. I went in through, you know, normal channels, so to speak. And I was elected by the trustees and appointed by Gordon Brown. You know, so I feel that actually my trajectory to get there was done, you know, legitimately. Of course, there were people who would say she got it because, you know, that always happens. And my kind of, all I would say is, well, the proof is in how I managed it, you know, and whether I proved myself to be good or not. And that's not for me to judge, that's for other people to judge. So I think that I feel pretty robust about my journey there. What was the second part of your question? I can't remember. Sorry.
It was the fact that you were the first woman chair.
Oh, the glass ceiling.
And do you think that women have broken the glass ceiling? I mean, you know, we all, as women, live in hope that that moment arrives, but somehow, in a way, it doesn't quite. I always feel.
No, I have to say, I don't think we're anywhere near it. I was reading the Lunch with the FT this morning, and I looked at the last 12 people they've interviewed, and there's 2 women. I thought, oh, really? You know, with 52% of the population, there's only 2 women they can think of to interview. Excuse me. And then you look at, for example, the women leaders the 5 of whom have led the 5 most successful reactions to COVID throughout the world.
I know.
Excuse me. I'm sorry, I'm not being to be a kind of bra-burning feminist here, but you know, there is a bit of a coincidence that, you know, you've got New Zealand, Iceland, Germany, you know, these are et cetera, et cetera. No, I don't think women are anywhere near the glass ceiling. But I think that also, I think we're getting there. I mean, I was the first chair in nearly 200 years, female chair of the National Gallery. So great.
I know. It was
not
a
so
huge
great, frankly.
thing.
It was great that I was, but it should have been before. And we have Mary Archer at the Science Museum. But actually, if I look around chairs, there aren't that many. If I look at directors, I think Maria Balshaw and Frances Morris are doing fantastic jobs there.
Of course.
And in the art world, you have really, really talented and excellent women working in the art world, and also in publishing, and also but it's not. I wouldn't say it was the norm. I have to tell you, if I look across businesses and society.
I mean, in business, it seems to be particularly absent, as you rightly say, the FT, the epicenter of business reporting. In the arts, you know, there's Yvonne Blaswick at the Whitechapel.
Oh yes, fantastic.
You know, the Chisenhale South London Gallery are both run by women. I mean, that has been a more kind of even spread of gender, but one should never assume. And you know, that until recently, Maria's, I think, the first woman director of Tate. And there hasn't yet, the Tate haven't followed your lead, to my, at least as far as I'm aware, I hope correctly, in appointing a woman to be chair. No. It's very, very fascinating. So, and of course, the visual arts, the country is facing this huge challenge post-COVID and what, if you were still chair of the National Gallery, what advice? What would you do? Not what advice, but what would you do? How would you address the current situation to try and make the institution robust for our times?
Yeah. You mean the National Gallery or the arts? The National Gallery specifically?
Both. Let's try both.
Okay, well, I'll start with the National Gallery. I think the National Gallery, if I walk around the National Gallery, which obviously I have to do in my head now, but I see 5 centuries of extraordinary artists reacting and distilling and interpreting some of the worst things that have happened to humankind. And they've been through pandemics, and they've been through wars, and they've been through, you know, natural disasters, and they've come through. So even someone like Titian died of the plague. They think Rembrandt may have died of the plague as well. Tintoretto, some of his greatest works was in reaction to the plague. So I think the National Gallery offers an extraordinary beacon of hope to us. You know, we can get through this. People have got through this. People have written and painted, etc. about it. So I would get the National Gallery open as soon as I possibly could, because I think it is a place. It's a respite, and it'll give everybody hope. Obviously, they have to socially distance, you know, but that's possible. It's absolutely, you know, you can go in one entrance, come out the other.
Yes.
And I think, you know, just as when Germany opened its museums, there were queues 3 or 4 times around the block. Yeah. That's the image we want for London. We want, and the country, we want to say we're open, and culture is the most important thing, in my opinion, for getting people's confidence back. Yes. And for giving us a roadmap, you know. And culture, by the way, I include restaurants. Very important, by the way. So I would do that. I think as far as the arts in the country go, I am, like many people, deeply, deeply worried about what will happen. Theatres are now saying they may not open till September 21. When the furloughing scheme tapers off in August, I cannot see how many small museums, whether it's Charleston or the Holborn, can possibly survive without furloughing. I cannot see how any small theatres. I think we'll lose orchestras. I think we'll lose. And I don't want to be gloomy, but it is. And then you think, actually, come on, government, you're bailing out a lot of different industries, and for a fraction of what it would cost to bail out, say, the airline industry. I mean, a fraction. We can keep the country open. We can keep the theatres light. And we can send a really great message to the world that Britain's still open for business, and the arts are something that we really care about.
Yes.
So and that's what I would do.
Well, and you know how we can tell from the messages coming in, so many people agree with you. And indeed, I mean, one of the things that I think is so interesting about the arts now is that the connection it provides, I wouldn't put in place of religion, but in tandem with religion. I mean, it's a way that people can reconnect with themselves, which of course is so incredibly important. And particularly now when we're all feeling, I think, anxious to some degree. And absolutely, maybe very, very frightened, and with good reason. We don't know whether COVID is going to come back. We don't know what the future of the country is going to be. We don't know if we're going to all have jobs. I mean, all of that it's a fearsome position to be in, which means I think that we all have to reinvent ourselves and also how we think about the world and what we've taken for granted to date. And the arts, of course, would be marvelous for that.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah,
it's a very sobering time indeed. And is the foundation thinking about how it can, your message, which has been so inspiring, can really kind of help government to see and deliver really what you're suggesting?
Yeah. So what we've done, I mean, we do different things in the different countries we operate in. But in this country, what we've done is to honour every commitment we have, existing commitment to the arts organisation. We do mainly give to the arts. So we honour that. And then in the first, I think there are 3 phases with COVID. I think there is an immediate crisis. And by that, I mean food banks, abuse within families, getting children hot meals, helping the aged and the lonely, and getting medicine out. So that was the first thing we concentrated on. The second phase, which we've moved into or are moving into now, is trying to help smaller organisations which frankly don't have lifelines.
Yeah.
So, that might be a kind of NGO, for want of a better description, a small local charity. And that we do lots of things in Buckinghamshire, because that's where Waddesdon is, which we run as well. So, for example, we're working with a local council with Heart of Bucks. And then there'll be a third phase, which I think which we are trying to work out bluntly, like everybody else, trying to work out what the hell do we do, which will be a more considered, longer term, philanthropic, initiatives. And there, I had a meeting with other people, with the Secretary of State yesterday, Oliver Dowden, to see what we could do as philanthropists to work together to support the arts. It would be great if the Treasury would consider some form of incentives or breaks, for example, to individuals. It would be wonderful if this fractured moment could bring together institutions, whether it's somewhere like today's Ropatch or whether it's the Tate or the National. I think we must all work together to try and support each other through this. I mean, how are young artists going to survive?
Yeah.
How are young actors, young musicians, or old actors, old musicians, old artists?
Yeah.
I mean, for that matter, I think we've got to come. This is a moment we can come together and do something truly wonderful together.
Yes, and that in a way is a hope in amongst all this mayhem and madness and uncertainty, which is inspiring. And I mean, there are so many wonderful stories that you read up. I mean, I read the newspaper every day and always find myself in tears, which sounds very sentimental, and I don't think of myself as being particularly sentimental, but there are extraordinary tales of stories of bravery and also of tragedy. It's incredibly tough. Incredibly tough. And so in terms of the future and your own projects, you've got the series of books, or a book coming up in your series. Have you got any plans for filmmaking? Or to make a new film?
I haven't completely given up with the idea of films, but I have to say, I do rather love, my love affair with literature. And films, you have to have a love affair with an awful lot of people when you make a film.
Yes.
There's a big crew, and there's a lot of things involved. So I think perhaps as I've got older, I've become more introverted. So yes, I'd like to make another film, of course, but it's going to have to be something quite extraordinary, I think, to tempt me out of my lair.
And you don't see yourself making films on your iPhone, for example?
Oh no, I think there are many people better than I am. Lots of people. I think, it's a young person. I don't want to sound defeatist and ageist, but I think making films is a young person's game. It requires lots of energy and resourcefulness and technical wizardry, and there's so many talented people out there. I think it's their turn.
Yes. I mean, I think that's really one of the really exciting things that at the moment, we're having to, I've never done Instagram Live before doing this series of conversations, and it's an enormous privilege for me to be able to do it. But this period, because we've been in lockdown, I feel, I speak personally, I've had to learn new skills that I didn't think I could ever master. And suddenly new avenues open up, which is incredibly exciting. Yeah. So if you were thinking about the world for your children, the world that your children are going to inhabit, what would you like, what picture would you like to paint for them? Or story that you would like to write for them?
That's a really wonderful question, and almost impossible, I think, to to answer. I do obviously think on a daily basis about my children and what I'd like to happen for them. I suppose that if there's anything good that can come out of this terrible situation that we're living through, it's that I think we can go back a little bit more to basics and a bit more to, I think to say a simpler life sounds as if we're regressing, but actually a life where, you know, human connections, we really value them more. You know, one of my daughters the other night, she'd been in the country and she met a friend for the first time for 10 weeks. I don't want to make her sound like a dipso, but anyway, they took a bottle of wine to a park and they stayed up till 3 o'clock in the morning sharing this bottle of wine. And she came back and she was shining, literally shining with, you know, and she said, Mom, you know, I just didn't realize that just lying with a girlfriend, you know, in a park with a bottle of wine, looking at the stars could be so magical. And maybe there's a lesson from that. Maybe actually rather than frantically running from job to job and experience to experience and qualification to qualification. My children are very qualified. Maybe actually lying in a park looking at the stars, maybe that's what they could take away.
Yes.
Possibly. A different kind of life.
It's such a wonderful conclusion to this conversation, and I'm really grateful to you for coming to talk to me on a Saturday morning.
Thank you. It's been fun.
No, really.
Really fun.
And it's lovely to see you too. I hope you have a wonderful weekend.
You too.
I now have a little short message to say how people can watch or re-watch the previous teas that I've had on Gallery Today's ROPAC YouTube channel or on our IGTV. Our Paris gallery in the Marais has reopened with Anthony Gormley and Sylvie Fleury exhibitions. We're also thrilled to announce that Ron Merck was joining the gallery, and his first exhibition will take place in our London gallery in October. And then next Saturday, I will be having tea with Patrizia Sandretto Re Rebadengo, who is a collector, philanthropist, and founder and president of the Fondazione Sandretto Re Rebadengo. The Fondazione was created in 1995, and a new exhibition venue was opened in Turin in 2002. It's widely acknowledged centre for research, experimentation, and exchange between artists, critics, curators, and collectors globally. Patrizia has also formed a stellar collection of contemporary art over 25 years, which is regularly on loan to museums and galleries internationally. So, dear Hannah, thank you again, and the best of luck with the new novel, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you so much, Julia. It was lovely.
Great pleasure. Bye.
Bye-bye.